This is our final speaker. Can I get a collective? Oh. But he's amazing. So can I get a yeah? Average. I'll let you off there. I will let you off. Okay. He really is something of a living legend. I'm sure he'll hate me saying that when it comes to graphic design. He is a multiple award-winning designer, multiple features in prestigious collections around the world, but perhaps most loved for inspiring global change through his work, through art and activism. Give him a round of applause, Clive Russell.
We live in a world brimming with brands designed to feed consumption. It's a race to see which of these brands can win the most attention and gain the most capital from that attention. And this fuels record levels of production. The machine never stops, whether it's a car-making machine, an entertainment-making machine, or a machine that searches for both. Production and consumption has been accelerating over the past 30 years. But it's been the leading light of our so-called developed democratic societies since the 18th century. But there is a failure at the root of this system, a failure in every design that serves it. And that failure is double-edged. The first and most obvious part of that failure is that our shared planet is not an infinite resource. It cannot support unfettered consumerism. At some point, resources run out, systems fail, wars happen, people die. And if the system we use to guide us is not tuned in to the system that gives us life, the failures become more catastrophic. We co-create a mass extinction event. Now, the second part of the failure is less obvious, but we can see it playing out around us. To truly succeed in production and consumption, you need predictability. And predictability doesn't like competition. That's why big companies buy smaller companies. Think about the software we designers use. Once upon a time, there were many providers of graphics programs. But now one company owns everything and charges rent free from competition. It owns the land of professional graphics software. It has created its own feudal software state. And this is repeated all over the marketplace, from entertainment to logistics. And this is all bad news. Or is it? Because perhaps it's an opportunity. Because if unfettered consumerism has to end, or we all die, and design's brief is to serve consumerism, perhaps it's now time to say no to briefs asking us to sell shit. Perhaps we need to say it's time for a new brief and say yes to briefs asking us to embrace uncertainty. Uncertainty is the opposite of predictability, and it's exactly what designers can tackle. And periods of uncertainty have created explosions of creativity. And it's kind of what we've seen happening in the past many, many times. Rethinking things, experimenting with new ideas. And behind me, there's a few historical examples. On the left, we have the arts and craft movement, represented here by a pattern by William, or should I say, actually Jane Morris. Now, they were appalled by the inequality and poverty of 19th century Britain. So they proposed a solution, and that solution was craft. By using craft, They hope to lift people out of poverty because they could give them back pride in their work and they could give them back their communities. And below that, there is the Bauhaus, arguably the most influential design movement of the 20th century. The Bauhaus tried to undermine the myth of the genius artist, replacing it with teaching that increased the average of everyone. And across the slide, a personal favorite of mine, May 68, Paris, demanding change by painting the streets with wonderful slogans like, "Be reasonable, demand the impossible." And at the back, the wonderful suffragettes, who were demanding the very reasonable, a vote for women. All use and interpret design to communicate radical new ideas. All seek to alter society. All are collaborations using different skill sets, and they all wrote their own brief. Because if the brief serves the wrong purpose, a purpose that will ultimately destroy the planet, increase inequality, marginalize vulnerable people, the brief must change. Here's a brief I wrote with 3 friends in May 2018. Well, 3 friends and a host of activists who wanted to change the shit show we're living in. It was a collaboration using many skills. And we were all united by the same purpose, to drive a wedge into the political agenda, a climate crisis-shaped wedge. That was the brief. The name had to be obvious. It started out as Out of Time. Now, that wouldn't do. So it was quickly changed to explain exactly what we were. We're a rebellion against extinction. The term rebellion is very precise and very important. This isn't a revolution. It's a rebellion against the inaction of the government. The Declaration of Rebellion behind me called out the failure of the UK government to protect its citizens. Its style reflects broadsides, which are a traditional UK publication for berating governments and institutions. We act in peace with ferocious love of these lands in our hearts. Yes, nationalism, but not the shitty nationalism we're so tragically used to. This told everyone why members of XR were prepared to be arrested. It was for the benefit of all, for the benefit of the country. It was a sacrifice by the few for the many. And simple demands were added too. Tell the truth. The government must tell the truth to its citizens about the climate crisis. Act now. The government must act now to protect its citizens from the climate crisis, or the citizens must act now to force the government to protect it. And most importantly of all, decide together or beyond politics. Because we need a political upgrade. Our current democratic processes are killing us. We need a new way of making decisions, a way which allows citizens to make decisions by themselves, for themselves. We need citizens' assemblies. Enough about words, pictures, or tools. A good set of tools inspire people to use them. And we channeled a lot of craft into the tools we created. Fux Caps is based on Futura Bold condensed, but altered to be more wood type. Wood type has flaws, which show it's handmade. And these imperfections are in Fux Caps, making it more human, flawed, like we all are. I'm often asked why I didn't make a lowercase. And if I'm tired and a little bored, I say, because I'm lazy. But the real reason is that you don't shout in lowercase. Extinction Rebellion is angry. Angry but peaceful. Love and rage. And of course, a set of woodcuts by my wonderful friend and neighbour, Miles, echoing the arts and crafts movement, but also making the horrific more playful. The skull is smiling. And we added a bright and cheerful colour palette, a palette to inspire people to make things, a palette to inspire play. And this is where we really changed the thinking. Because instead of holding on to these assets, building a team, carefully curating the end product, we gave everything away. We created a design package which evolves over time in the hands of many people. Genius? Not really. It was simply doing the opposite of production and consumption. We did the work for free. We gave it away. It was an act of care. Like these posters behind me, they all share similarities. They're all different, and none of them are designed by me. So which is better? It doesn't matter. Aesthetics don't matter. The purpose matters, and all these posters are unified by a shared purpose. If we reduce everything to aesthetics, design is just ornamentation. If design channels a purpose, it becomes so much more. The posters are from a 2019 campaign called Paint the Streets, where people literally went out and painted the streets. Reclaiming space is a powerful way to tell people and governments that you're here. After all, it's exactly what companies do to us, advertising their products on public land, our land. Who gave advertisers permission to advertise on public land? Who gave advertisers permission to advertise on our feeds? We didn't. The land grab of common land and the virtual grab of the internet has meant corporations own our streets and our internet. So if advertisers are allowed to advertise on our streets, why shouldn't we? Plus, it's fun. And it was part of the do-it-together ethos behind the work, a do-it-together aesthetic combined with do-it-together activities. I seem to be missing a slide. Can I go back? Oh, that's interesting. So, the same ethos was used to make everything. We constantly flipped between digital and analog, making it as inclusive as possible. Big banners were hand-painted, clothes were printed, and blocks were inked and stamped on to achieve beautiful results. So imagine behind me there's people doing that sort of stuff instead of a big pink boat, which you may have seen before. The XR Art Factory we co-created is still freely working for the community today. And during the 2019 rebellions, art blocking stations were set up in roads all over central London. We encouraged everyone to join us, print on their clothes, pin patches on their bags. And as they joined us, they talked with us, and it helped bridge gaps of understanding. Crucially, what we didn't do was sell merch. Everything will change. Everyone can change. So that's... The colors, the font, the look and feel, many hands working together. A sea of flags, a sea of color, a joyous rebellion, a moment of truth. And the idea and artwork were collected and released as a best-selling book, and I got to kill a cultural penguin. And more importantly, XR was able to reach a vast audience. Oh, the slides are very iffy. Okay, giving away the work meant it started to appear everywhere, all via a download and a website filled with self-organizing ideas, combined, of course, with the bravery of ordinary people giving up their liberty. So hopefully, I've shown you what design can do, how it can be used to radically change how we think and act. But how do we get rid of our addiction to production and consumption? XR didn't achieve that. I don't know what's coming next. That was the other slide. Okay, while I was working on XR, I was lucky enough to meet and become friends with David Graeber. And David was a big fan of playfulness. Sadly, he died too young in September 2020. David believed direct action was the pathway to change, a way for people to take responsibility for themselves and collectively pursue new ways of thinking, to think more freely. And David had a lot to say about production and consumption. Here's an excerpt from a lecture of his. You have to imagine his beautiful New York accent, because I'm not going to do that. That would be awful. I propose that we just rip up the discipline of economics as it exists and start over. I think we should take the ideas of production and consumption, throw them away, and substitute for them the idea of care and freedom. Think about it. A production and consumption paradigm for what an economy is a guarantee for ultimately destroying the planet and each other. I mean, even when you talk about degrowth, you're working within that paradigm. You're essentially doomed. We need to break away from that paradigm entirely. Care and freedom, on the other hand, are things you can increase as much as you like without damaging anything. So we need to think, what are the ways that we need to care for each other that will make each other more free? And who are the people who are providing that care? And how can they be compensated themselves with greater freedom? And to do that, we need to scrap almost all of the discipline of economics as it currently exists. It's not up to someone to change the world. It's up to all of us. And remember, you can always call on the past for help. It's ever present. Movements like Extinction Rebellion are briefs written by ordinary people like you and me. So my question to you is, what brief will you write? Am I staying up?
Unfortunately, Clive, we don't have time for any more questions, but I insist that you stay there and take another round of applause, please, because, yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Good stuff. Thank you. Thanks a lot, man. Yes. Oh, yes. Rage. Rage.